people can go to therapy and there's not even a checkbox on the intake form to say, are you adopted? Just there's no question about it. So then adoptees, a lot of times they don't realize that that could be an issue. And until someone kind of informs them gently, like this could be a factor in how you feel, and like ease into that for that person so their walls of defense don't fly up. Way beyond the assessment, just to have the understanding as well as that there has been a trauma and it's the separation. It doesn't always have to necessarily be the adoption in of itself, because people get really, really defensive about that. Some people like, oh, my family was wonderful, and that's great that they had that experience and they feel that. Every issue that I had always went back to the relinquishment and the separation from my birth mother. So being able to talk to someone about it for the first time was very relieving, even just be able to process it and get it out instead of holding it in. But you want to be careful because you don't want to just tell your story to people who have no understanding what you've gone through in your process. And so all of that together has brought me where I am now, to realize the pain that there is in adoption.
I think one of the things that's most helpful is the empathetic ear, not trying to push down or demean your experience, especially if they've not been through it. I think we can agree there's a dearth of adoption competent therapists out there. So the vast majority of therapists are not well versed in adoption related issues. They are going to be in a position of needing to learn from you. And that empathetic ear is going to be incredibly important, because if they assume that their scholastic learning is the end all be all for your therapy, they're going to end up alienating you because they're not willing to learn about your unique experience. And so I think it's a strong therapist who will take the time to dig into what adoption actually means. A child was removed from their original family and placed with another family. The therapist has to sit in that for a little while and truly contemplate, what would this have meant for me? What childhood separation from parents is, what all of the sort of tools you've been taught as a therapist are as it applies to what we've established as the scenario for adoption, and not diminishing the fact that an individual says, like, this impacted me in a big way, when they've come to that realization, and not saying things like, well, you shouldn't feel that way, right? You don't tell me how to feel. I know what I went through, and the adoption separation, the potential trauma of the adoption, the adoptive family that I lived in, the trauma of the reunion where I don't feel accepted. All of these things are very real, and you have to let the person who's expressing them sort of own them, and allow them to own them, and help them to sort of reach healthy ways of understanding that what happened to you does not define you.
It's been a great source of grounding for me. I love therapy. I've been in it since a very young age for a variety of reasons. And every time it's a great way to sort of reconnect with myself and evaluate where I am compared to where I've been, my own growth, to inspire a growth mindset for the future. Even when I feel stuck now, like I can look back and say, I was going through much more complicated emotional turmoil. I think I'll be okay, actually. It sort of puts things in perspective, and that's really helpful to move forward, just in general. Encouraging the individual's journey about what these emotions sort of are leading them to in their own lives, and helping them realize that is the most important thing. There's this instinct to also be curious. about someone from a background that you haven't experienced. A lot of questions can be assumptions. Questions of, especially my favorite is, have you ever thought about your birth parents? And the answer is always yes. And all those questions are very important, and that discovery is exciting, but it is not necessarily helpful to the adoptee as a patient. It's not necessarily a helpful question, or you won't get a beneficial answer. Something more helpful would be asking about the adoptee's own place in that discovery, where they're at with the emotions. Start from the beginning and not necessarily assuming anything, but letting them explain everything that they know and helping them through what they do have and how they might want to go about their own discovery and peace of mind.
It's definitely been helpful for me as someone in therapy. Is I bring like scenarios that happen and then I'll say, this is how I reacted, but I don't know if I would like to like unpack why maybe I reacted that way when this person said this or this happened. You know what? I identified something that I know I think every time. Let's unpack why I think this. Therapist very much understands the adoptee experience. She's in a lot of training in the area and, is personally acquainted with adoption herself. So she does understand it.
As an adult adoptee, I would say that addressing race and adoption as core themes is incredibly important. When I think back to my experience in therapy over the years, race and adoption were never themes that were necessarily at the forefront. And when I think back of how that's impacted me as I'm an adult now, I'd say that it definitely did. So I recall therapy sessions where we talked about abandonment. I don't recall sessions around race, which I think has been very detrimental in my own journey of identity growing up. I recall being evaluated for being ADD. And I read through that evaluation and did not one time mention race or my adoption experience. And to me, that's a missed opportunity. If you are working with an adoptee and they are of a different race, I think addressing race and adoption are necessary, and giving space for them is honestly like the first step. Therefore, when I recall my experiences growing up, like being called slang terms, there was an assumption one time I went to this store with my mom and this woman thought that I was a foreign exchange student. Those were never, although maybe talked about in my home because my parents were open, my adoptive parents were, it would have been very helpful to be addressing those in therapy. When I was growing up, I lived in a small town and it was very white. So to be able to go see a therapist of color was not really an option. Diverse therapists there wasn't an option. And looking back, I think for me that would have been helpful. So now as an adult, I do seek out more diverse therapists who maybe identify for me as an Asian American. So for me, that is important to be able to have mirrors, those racial mirrors, to even start the conversation.
My first experience with therapy was when I was 16. I attempted to take my life, and I was put in therapy. There, I learned the value just simply of being able to talk about what it feels like to be an adoptee without judgment and without an expectation of having to take care of my parents' feelings. Having a safe place to talk about the downside of adoption. I did once have a therapist who in college, when I said, I think a lot of my problems are because I'm adopted. She said something very dismissive and I never went back. Understanding the adoptee experience for adoptees takes a lifetime. Many adult adoptees are just getting into therapy or just looking at this stuff now. A lot of the work is really painful, excavating of trauma and grief and loss that is not easy to do. And I understand why people don't do it because it's brutal. But when you do it, you get to this core that is, exquisitely sad and exquisitely beautiful.